Where do things go when we forget them? The miracle is, perhaps, that there ever was a mechanism with which to trap parts of the world as they pass through us. It is nothing less than the miracle of consciousness. Without memory, one does not exist. Perhaps that despiser of the natural world, Descartes, would have been more accurate had he said, I remember, therefore I am. If we are witnesses without memory, we are not witnesses at all. A hollow cylinder through which the wind blows will not remember the whistle it produces. Hey everybody, thank you so much as always for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today, I'm excited to talk about Antkind by Charlie Kaufman. This is his debut novel coming out of a very successful career in the film industry where he has been a writer, producer, director, sometimes wearing multiple hats. His breakout movie was Being John Malkovich. Then he would go on to do such treasures as Adaptation, Synecdoche, New York, The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and then more recently, Anomalisa and I'm Thinking of Ending Things. There are others, but that's just sort of the most salient précis. The plot in this novel is fantastic. It's a great hook. Imagine that you are an ambitious but failed film critic with extreme aspirations to get to the very top of your field, no matter what it takes. And then you alone discover a groundbreaking film that is 3 months long and took the filmmaker 90 years to put together. And this film is absolutely certain to turn the whole history of film and film studies upside down. You're the first and only person to ever watch the film. But during the viewing, the filmmaker dies. And then afterwards, as you're trying to transport this film back to New York City to set forth on your groundbreaking discovery and pioneer this new facet and direction of the industry and secure your name for all time as the greatest ever film critic, all of the film goes up in flames except for one single frame. The movie now exists solely in your memory. Oh, but also, at the same time that you were trying to rescue the film from the flames, you went into a 3-month-long coma. And so when you come to, you will think, just like the character here, this is not a movie I will remember properly. It lives only in the irrational, as does a dream. My rational mind, the bully, will strong-arm it away from me and fill in the blanks. Add explanations because it cannot let it be. This bully contaminates the dream, changes it into something smaller, manageable, tellable. The dream as it is cannot be told. So it is with this film. In the remembering or telling, it becomes something else. And so the truth of it is destroyed. And I go on with my life, with my anemic attempts to portray the world in its fullness. This plot, this scenario, sets up all kinds of fertile ground for someone like Charlie Kaufman. The nature and interplay of art, memory, consciousness, and time, of course, which is so rampant throughout his films. Consciousness as an inescapable curse. It's notable that in the beginning of Being John Malkovich, John Cusack's character refers to consciousness as this terrible curse. Now, what's so great is that he looks at their pet chimp, Elijah, and he basically says, Elijah, be thankful you don't have to deal with consciousness. But later in the film, the camera zooms into the interiority of Elijah, and we see that, oh, Cusack's character is wrong. Actually, Elijah does have consciousness. Erasing memories or extracting memories and trying to get a clean slate or a really clean product without any of our own contamination as no guarantee. But here in this book, the experience of art is more at the fore. I recognize now that remembering the movie is the movie, the character says. It is imprecise, but it is the only tool we have to maintain contact with the world through time. And much earlier in the book, he says memory is a map of sorts, but hand drawn, incomplete, and full of errors. It can let you know a place exists, but you cannot trust it to get you there. There is the film, of course, or the symphony, or the painting, or the book, sitting there by itself, unobserved by anyone. This could be said to be the objective work of art. But nothing can really be said of it other than that, because a work of art depends on an audience. And with each person that consumes a single work of art, the same work of art, the film or book or whatever, is mixing what it has to give in with each person's unique consciousness, unique memories, the unique composition of qualia. Nonetheless, B's plight, B, we'll get to him in a moment, B's plight is to do whatever he can through whatever means necessary to carefully and precisely extract just his viewing of the film itself, from his memories. Like an archaeologist digging up fossils to assemble them and reconstruct them into what they originally were and put them on display in a museum for others. And he talks a little bit about why this is so impossible. A movie is not only the image on the screen, the sound from the speakers. It is the translation of all this by the brain. It is the social milieu. It is the year you see it, your age, the state of your marriage. It is what happened on the way to the theater, what you expect to happen after. It is who is next to you on each side. It is how they smell. It is who sits in front of you, who is or isn't kicking your seat from behind. It is your worry about the call from the doctor. It is life, which you only get to live once. You prepare for it, but it will surprise you anyway. The film is predetermined, but revealed to you only through time incrementally. This makes you think it is a living thing, a thing for which you can change the outcome. And so he ends up going to a hypnotist who has this emerging technology that we've actually already seen once in its future instantiation. But he has the prototype of this amazing technology that purports to do exactly what he wants. And as he tells the hypnotist, I need to remember the movie as precisely as possible. The hypnotist, of course, says there is no pure objective memory of a work of art to be had. And he says it needs to be Ingo's work. That's the name of the filmmaker, Ingo Cutbirth. It must. Maybe if I restrain myself, I can stick to the original camera angles, not stray, not explore. Maybe Ingo wanted you to explore. Isn't it possible he put this all in there for you to get lost in? I'm not sure I have the courage to go back, meaning go back and explore under the hypnotism. I don't want to get lost, but I do go back in. I do get lost. So another big thing that this book brings up that I just love to explore is, what does it really mean to get lost in a work of art? Of course, he also tries other things. He has that one frame from the film, and he says that in my apartment, I stare through a professional jeweler's loupe at the single remaining frame of Ingo's film. I should be able to study this frame and with great precision predict the frame that follows it as well as the one that precedes it. So what's interesting here is that one frame becomes a synecdoche for the whole film. And of course, he has the movie Synecdoche, New York, which thinks about the part representing the whole and vice versa. And this also becomes a sort of synecdoche, K-E-Y. Furthermore, this points to my favorite invention of all the inventions in Thomas Pynchon's Against the Day. There are actually a lot of similarities between Against the Day and Aunt Kind. And we're sort of getting to the elephant in the room. I've portrayed this book as quite serious and heady and complex, but we're getting there. I was thinking about what it must have been like for Charlie Kaufman, who is so well known as a screenwriter, and bringing out a debut novel after such amazing successes as the movies that I've mentioned. And, him balancing giving longtime Kaufman fans what they want, giving them a novel where they can say, yes, this is a novel that I would expect of Charlie Kaufman, but then also presenting something that invites maybe newcomers or people who didn't even know he had a hand in those movies into his strange but alluring and brilliant world. And he does a great job interweaving the highbrow and the lowbrow, just like Pynchon does in novels like Against the Day and Inherent Vice. Like the character B says at one point, I am neither highbrow nor lowbrow. I am simply brow. Symbolism absolutely abounds, from the opening little vignette that prefaces the book proper of the ocean and the creature on the shore, wherein the characters actually engage in symbolic decoding and interpretation. And they talk about the interpretation of oceans and sea creatures, and they go into the story of Jonah and the whale, sort of preempting the critical impulse. Then it goes to tunnels and caves, sewers, manholes, or person holes, as B calls them, as synecdoches for B's psyche or consciousness. Think of the tunnel that leads to the consciousness of John Malkovich. Thus, his merciless and incessant fallings into person holes aren't merely hijinks. To stop motion film, stop motion animation, because this 3-month long work is, of course, stop motion, just as Anomalisa is, to ants, to puppets. Sometimes interpretation is offered, sometimes it's left to us. There are parallels between the book and his films, but without being mere regurgitations. Like being John Malkovich, B is driven only by his desire to succeed in his art. Like adaptation, Ant Kind ends up being the narrative of B's goal becoming his quest, just as Charlie's goal of producing the script from a book becomes the product of him writing about his struggle to do so. Like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, B's memory and its alterations become a means to possible happiness. Like Synecdoche, New York, B pursues his crowning achievement while everything in his life falls apart and his body itself begins to diminish. A variation on Cotard's syndrome. Okay, now I want to address the elephant in the room, and I'm just going to make this one statement and then I'm going to move on because I don't want to overstate it. This is the funniest book I have ever read in my life. There's a zinger on every single page, and it is a remarkable performance, especially at a scale of 700 pages. Sort of a defiance of Marx's quantity diminishes quality dictum. Kaufman's mind is clearly a delightfully chaotic marvel, a museum of clever madnesses. His incessant turns of phrase are saturated with a seasoned command of language and comedy. Like I kind of alluded to before, there are enough set pieces and gags and hijinks and pratfalls to challenge Pynchon. Comedy is so hard to do in literature. It's so hard to pull off. Like a friend with whom I've been sort of buddy reading this, she was talking about how so many books have promised, that you'll be falling out of your chair laughing and crying and your belly will ache. And then you read it and it's just kind of like, this is actually funny. And then you add to that Kaufman's obvious wealth of knowledge of film. Then this surprisingly sumptuous amount of literary knowledge. I mean, it's very clear to me just from his movies alone that he has been a lifelong close reader. I mean, there's a Don DeLillo cameo in the book. Well, it's Don DeLillo responding in writing, but DeLillo nonetheless. And there's a brilliant Hemingway allusion. Some guy is selling a pair of swirling hypno eyeglasses, never worn. It's the saddest ad I've ever seen. But it goes deeper even than just DeLillo and Hemingway. In Being John Malkovich, for example, it's uncanny how much John Cusack looks like David Foster Wallace. But then John Malkovich is reading Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard. In adaptation, The New Yorker is a big presence. In Synecdoche, New York, the box office worker is reading Swan's Way. and Caden's second wife, an actress from the set, is reading the poetry of Anne Sexton. In I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which you can watch on Netflix right now, there's a shot of Ice by Anna Kavan. And there's a very strategically, almost hidden, a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again, to an already exciting, enticing plot. Kaufman layers on so much dressing with this character, B. Rosenberg. B, he goes by to be gender neutral, and it hides the fact that B is actually Balaam, the Old Testament prophet who goes against God's commands and is riding a donkey, and the donkey stops because the donkey sees the angel of the Lord and stops and knows not to proceed. Balaam gets really upset and strikes the donkey 3 different times, and finally the donkey miraculously speaks and says, "Why are you hitting me?" And in fact, one of the things that Balaam Rosenberg will escape with from Florida is not only that one film frame, but also a donkey puppet. And there's all kinds of donkey stuff, and there's stuff thrown in as he begins to diminish in size throughout the book where he says, "My ears are way too big for my head," and things like that. Because he is a donkey. He's an ass. He's an absolute buffoon whose determination not to offend anyone ends up offending everyone. He has... there are so many things that make this character and his situations so enjoyable to read and and make you easily able to stick with for 700 pages, because we're in his point of view. We're trapped in his point of view. But there's just so many things. I can't catch them all in this video, but he has innumerable minor degrees from Harvard. I mean, almost everything that comes up, he's got a minor degree in that. So he's a specialist. In his mind, he's a specialist at everything, in all manner of hilarious disciplines, including like number of the beast studies and things like that. But sometimes these degrees combine to really great comedic effect and shows kind of Kaufman's eye and ear for the comedy of language, such as, "I am, of course, just an armchair psychologist myself, with both upholstering and social work minors from Harvard." He has published countless monographs, reviews, articles, essays. He's got all these different blogs with absurdly hilarious titles. He says at one point, "I wrote an exceedingly long monograph of record-breaking length in tribute on long films called Showa Nuff, Undervaluation of Lengthy Films in Our Current Fast Food Film Culture." Showa, of course, being the over 9-hour long documentary of the Showa from Claude Lanzmann. He adores Judd Apatow and despises Christopher Nolan, but not as much as he berates, upbraids, vilifies, disparages Charlie Kaufman. What's so funny, though, is in face of B's ridicule of Christopher Nolan, the prelude that opens up the book strongly resembles a Christopher Nolan movie. And in fact, I even put a note in the margin, "This seems like the beginning of a Christopher Nolan film." And then it was just a few pages later that he said some disparaging remark about Christopher Nolan being the Starbucks of the film industry or something like that. I gotta find it. Let me find it, because it's actually pretty funny. "Starbucks is the smart coffee for dumb people. It's the Christopher Nolan of coffee. Dunkin' Donuts is lowbrow, authentic. It is the simple, real pleasure of a Judd Apatow movie." Now, when he goes to Florida to do some journalism on one movie, which is actually a real movie, it's called The Enchantment in Florida, he does run into this character who's unbelievably old named Ingo Cutbirth. And he's the one who invites B in to show him this 3-month-long movie. But he's told before viewing the movie that it's going to immerse him so much, he's going to get so lost in it, that his consciousness and the film, the lines between the two, are going to be completely blurred. And then furthermore, later, the hypnotist, who's winkingly named M. Barasini, who helps extract the film from B's memory, warns him of the danger inherent in the procedure. And so we've got these two cautions, one about viewing the film, one about extracting it. And so sure enough, we do witness B diminish and deteriorate in so many ways throughout the book. And this gives rise to an encyclopedia of solecisms, malapropisms, and eggcorns, especially with the names of well-known actors, actresses, actists, thons, and book and movie titles and so on, like proper names. I vaguely remember when this book came out in June or July of 2020, and I feel that it's so unfortunate for the book. At that time, of course, in the heat of COVID and political turmoil, I really don't think any of us were in the mood for a book like this. We weren't in the mood for its humor. And judging by this one paragraph, this was on Kaufman's mind. Furthermore, aside from my own tragedy, the world is in a shambles, and it is near impossible for me to keep from wallowing in the misery and worry these circumstances cause me. Our current president is a nightmare, I've heard, and people say this is a moment of great strife. We are on the verge of several wars, they say. I'm not sure where. And there is poverty in various places. A lot of it, apparently. Racism and sexism and other things have reared their ugly hydra heads, the wags insist. I should protest all of this. I should make a placard, but to what end? It seems I am of more use to the planet as a conduit to the work of Ingo Cutbirth, who, by the way, may be African American, or he may be Swedish. Perhaps his film is the thing that, in the end, saves the world. Perhaps. I must focus fully on this important work. Reading the early reviews, I noticed that one reviewer really took Kaufman to task, but sort of bizarrely, because they claimed that Kaufman should have stepped in to show where B was wrong and what he should have done. As understandable as that reaction is, however, we have to remember a couple of things. One, this is a novel. It's within the realm of artistic expression. And two, we are, by design, locked into B's first-person perspective. I think it's pretty clear that B is being used to satirize privileged whites who engage in performative identity politics. Think of the white girl in the classroom scene at the beginning of the recent movie American Fiction. B, in my reading, is actually a narcissistic sociopath who cares about one thing and one thing only, and that is achieving success as a film critic. He really has no position on identity politics. It's just that he's learned this is a game he must play in order to succeed in his field. The tension here, of course, is that the role of the critic, of which he is one, is all about imposing one's tastes, prejudices, and judgments on others and on the work of others. So the social satire inherent in the plot point that B is going to achieve his success off of the 90-year labor of an unknown, unseen black person, this ends up being totally subverted by the power of Ingo's art. In fact, the art is so powerful that it strips B of all of his selfish ambitions. I want to go back. I think that he satirizes privileged whites who are engaging in performative identity politics. That means they're putting on a real show of being super mindful. But I think it's also getting at predominantly straight white males who find themselves a little disoriented and confused about how they're supposed to conduct themselves. And I think it highlights anxieties that they may feel about how to go about conducting themselves in society without offending anyone. Again, though, I don't think that is where B is coming from. I don't think B really cares whether he offends anyone or not. Of course, that's all he ends up doing. He is just literally fixated on success at all costs. He cares nothing for the politics of anything. And in the end, it is his full submission to the art of an outsider that begins to set him free. The only way to share the film with others is to share what I have become. I have been transformed by it, and my presence will transform others. This is key. I will not attempt to master it, to own it. to teach it. Those days are over. The days of flag planting, of claiming ownership, are done. From here on in, I will submit to great art. It will do with me as it sees fit. I will go where it tells me. I will let it in, let it tear me limb from limb, eradicate me, rebuild me in its own image. I will dwell in it as does a subject in a heavenly kingdom. I will never again attempt to own anything. No person, no film, no idea. He tells his agent, I can no longer live in judgment of the work of others. I can't write any more criticism. And I love this right here. This mindset is how I like to come to every work of art. I don't know anything right now. I am learning. I am a student, always and forever a student, an absolute beginner, as they say. And that's good. That is the right thing to be. I can breathe. There is nothing to defend. I am free. Okay, I'm getting ready to wrap this up, but I do want to say that I'm getting ready to go into something that may be a spoiler. So if you haven't read it, if you don't want any spoilers, go ahead and stop watching right now. The book begins its descent, among many other things, with B becoming a movie, becoming literally film. He becomes a looping reel of film and says that he is reborn 24 times a second to match the standard frames per second of film and TV. And then finally, the book ends on the ultimate pratfall. I recognize now that remembering the movie is the movie, that even the pieces I can't remember are the movie. Memory is imperfect, it is imprecise, but is the only tool we have to maintain contact with the world through time. Without it, life as we know it ceases to exist. I hit the bottom. What's interesting to ponder, though, is whether Kaufman had the circularity of Finnegan's Wake in mind. Because just as we end with B having been transformed into film and then hitting the bottom after a long fall, the very opening of the book is it lands with a thunk from nowhere, out of time, out of order, thrown from the future or perhaps from the past, but landing here in this place at this moment, which could be any moment, which means, you guess, it's no moment. It appears to be a film. And then that, of course, throws light on the little prelude with Herbert and Dunham in 1869, just before we enter the book proper inside of B's consciousness. And so in a way, Antkind is a film, the film is B, and that very first thing we encounter that's sort of outside of everything and we have no context for, that lands with a thunk and appears to be a film, is all of these things wrapped up in one. It is B, it is this book, and we are also, in a sense, watching Ingo's film as filtered through B's consciousness, turning B into a work of art only because he finally let go of his selfish ambitions and submitted himself to a greater work of art. And so just as B professes at one point in the book that what now is basically the definition of life, I think that reading a book like Antkind paradoxically allows us to escape that question for 705 pages, but then leaves us to face the question for the rest of our lives.